In prison, the most dangerous thing a man can do is trust someone. Not because trust is weakness, but because in a place stripped of everything else, it becomes the one thing worth protecting. And when it breaks, it doesn't break quietly. Marcus and Deshawn had been moving together long before the state put them in the same cell. They came up on the same streets, ran product through the same distribution network, answered to the same people at the top. When they were both picked up in a coordinated sweep that took down half their operation, it felt, in a strange way, like continuity. They'd done everything else together. They'd do this too. Pod 7C in the North Wing became their world. 8 men sharing a space designed for 5. An ecosystem with its own rules, its own economy, its own power structure. In any pod, the dynamics establish themselves within the first week. Who sleeps where? Who commands respect? Who gets left alone and who gets tested? Marcus and Deshawn settled into a position most men inside spend years trying to reach, respected, connected, and largely unbothered. Their shared history gave them credibility. Their outside affiliations gave them leverage. Inside those walls, they were as close to untouchable as a person gets. That equilibrium held for almost 18 months. What changed was a case that had been building quietly in the background, a secondary investigation prosecutors had been sitting on, waiting for the right moment to deploy. New charges. Serious ones. The kind that didn't add months to a sentence but years. 12 years, according to Deshawn's attorney, was the number on the table if he chose to fight it. 12 years on top of what he was already serving. A number that transforms a sentence from something survivable into something that redefines a life entirely. Deshawn asked for a meeting with prosecutors. What happened in that meeting, and in the series of meetings that followed, was by every legal standard a negotiation. Deshawn had information. Investigators wanted it. Both sides understood the transaction being proposed. In exchange for cooperation, names, locations, operational details about a network that was still functioning on the outside, Deshawn would see significant time removed from his sentence. Protection would be arranged. His status inside would be managed carefully. The machinery of the deal moved slowly, deliberately, in the way these things always do when both parties are trying to ensure nothing leaks before it's supposed to. But someone had placed a recording device inside the pod. A small thing, the kind of technology that has become accessible enough to find its way behind walls through channels investigators understand well. The device captured conversations across several weeks. Not just Deshawn's side communications with handlers, but the texture of daily life in the pod, the negotiations that happen in low voices after lights out, the careful language men use when they're saying things they don't want repeated. Investigators decoded it carefully. What they assembled was a timeline of Deshawn's cooperation, of the information being passed, of the attack that was coming before anyone in authority moved to prevent it. The word got back to Marcus on a Tuesday. Nobody knows exactly how. Information in a prison environment travels through networks that are sophisticated and fast, resistant to official interference, and almost impossible to trace. What investigators know is that by Tuesday evening, Marcus had learned enough. Not everything, but enough. He spent Wednesday in a stillness that people around him noticed but didn't address. In a pod, you learn quickly not to ask a man what he's thinking when he goes quiet in a particular way. The attack happened Thursday morning. A shank made from a broken bed frame, the metal worked down over days until it held an edge, wrapped at the handle with torn electrical tape. 11 seconds from the moment Marcus moved to the moment correctional officers intervened. 3 puncture wounds. 1 collapsed lung. Deshawn survived, but only because the medical response was faster than it might have been had the pod been situated differently in the facility. The lockdown that followed was immediate and total. Deshawn was moved within hours, his safety inside any general population unit now an impossibility regardless of what protections had been promised. The cooperation that was supposed to remain sealed long enough to be useful had been exposed, and with it, any chance of Deshawn completing his sentence in anything resembling normal conditions. He was transferred to protective custody, a designation that keeps a man safe in the narrowest sense while removing nearly everything else that makes confinement bearable. The smuggled audio became central to 3 separate legal proceedings. What had been collected as an investigative tool became testimony, became evidence, became the documented record of how a deal was struck and how it unraveled. Prosecutors used it to demonstrate the scope of Deshawn's cooperation. Defense attorneys used portions of it to argue their clients had been implicated through recordings obtained under questionable circumstances. Judges parsed its admissibility across hearings that stretched over months. Deshawn's sentence was ultimately reduced. The number his attorneys negotiated down to was significantly lower than the 12 years that had been hanging over the table when the conversations began. Whether that reduction felt like a victory to the man receiving it is something only he could say. Marcus was charged with aggravated assault in addition to the charges he was already serving. His release date, which had once been a fixed point on the horizon he was moving toward, receded. The calendar of his life inside extended in ways that are difficult to quantify because they affect not just time but everything that depends on time. The larger conversation that followed touched something the correction system has never fully resolved. Informants are essential to how investigations function inside prisons and out. Without cooperation, cases go cold. Networks stay intact. But the protection offered to those who cooperate is structural on paper and fragile in practice. The distance between what is promised and what can actually be guaranteed is the space where people get hurt. Deshawn understood the deal he was making. He understood the risk. He made the calculation that most men in his position make, that his own survival, measured in years, was worth the cost of what he was trading away. The question the system has never answered satisfactorily is who is responsible for the cost when that calculation goes wrong.